The Benelli Leoncino 500 is one of our most favorite neo-retro motorcycles of recent times. Agreed that neo-retros aren't really bikes with mass appeal, they do have a certain amount of coolness associated with them. It's not a segment where outright performance is an absolute must. It's all about finding that right balance which the 500 had in spades. So, is it the same story with the new Leoncino 250? That just means 250 in Italian. The Leoncino 250 does look quite familiar, very similar to the 500 actually. But there are some critical differences. Obviously, it's running a smaller engine, half the cubic capacity and half the number of cylinders. While the fuel tank shape looks almost the same, it's a smaller tank. In fact, the whole bike is smaller and it's running more reasonably sized components. And even the tire sizes are more reasonable. All that makes it nearly 40 kilos lighter than the 500. If this Leoncino has to make a mark in the 250 segment, then it better be ready to handle some serious competition. Now this is a slightly unfair comparison. The Duke here, it's made in India, while the Leoncino comes in as a CKD. But that doesn't explain the performance difference. Now both these motors actually are quite similar. Both are single cylinder, liquid cooled, and even the bore and stroke figures are almost identical. But they could be more different in the way they behaved. The Duke motor is properly peaky, while the Leoncino's motor is a lot more tractable. But that makes 3 Newton meters more, almost 4 PS more, and the bike is a kilo lighter as well. So in all our performance tests, it absolutely thrashed the Leoncino. The KTM was half a second quicker to 60, 2.5 seconds quicker to 100, and even in-gear acceleration was a little bit quicker on the Duke. Heck, even braking figures are better for the KTM, and it gives better in-city efficiency as well. And to top things off, that KTM is actually more comfortable than the Leoncino, but we'll get to why in just a bit. Tell you what, there's a chart that actually explains what the differences are between these two bikes and exactly how much superior the KTM is to this Benelli. So it's simple. If you want the better bike, go for the KTM. Heck, it's half a lakh rupees cheaper than the Benelli as well. Even the Gixxer 250 outperforms the Leoncino in every measurable way, and that's a whole 90 grand cheaper than this. So is there any merit to this Leoncino 250 at all? Yes, there is. Now the Leoncino 500 had proved that you don't need massive performance to have an enjoyable riding experience. It's the same story with this Leoncino 250 as well. Fine, that motor is from the often problematic TNT 2.5, but it has been massively retuned on this Leoncino. It makes a lot less power now, the upshot of which is you get significantly improved bottom and mid-range performance. In fact, this motor is so tractable that it pulls cleanly from 2.5 to 3000 RPM. So which means carrying 35 kph in 5th gear? Yeah, sure. In fact, I was carrying about 42, 43 in 6th. And if you have to shift gears, that gearbox is plenty smooth as well. Sure, it doesn't have the sharp shifting feel of something like a KTM or a Honda, and the travel is a little bit on the higher side, but it works absolutely fine. And even maneuvering through traffic is no problem because the wide bars give you plenty of leverage, so you can really find your way through jammed roads without any issues whatsoever. And that makes the Leoncino 250 a great city motorcycle. Sure, it might not scramble its way off the road, but it will definitely hustle its way beautifully in the urban jungle. What's more, the Leoncino 250 feels relatively vibe-free at city speeds, although it does sound a little gruff. That said, with short bursts of the throttle, the exhaust note mixed with the booming intake roar is quite endearing. What do you think of the Leoncino's exhaust note? Let us know in the comment section below. What is especially impressive on this Leoncino is the ride quality. Now don't get me wrong, it is set up a little bit on the firmer side and there's not much travel in the front and rear suspension. So when you go over these small and sharp bumps, you do feel them. But the way it tackles big bumps and big speed breakers is nothing short of amazing, because there's barely any movement past the suspension. You don't feel any of that. And on top of that, there's plenty of ground clearance there as well. So while the Leoncino might not be a scrambler, it can handle our roads, which, let's face it, are as good as no roads. Now this might be a little bit shocking, but for a bike of such tiny proportions, it's got the longest wheelbase in its class. So yes, it is plenty stable in a straight line. But don't think for 1 second that it's not eager to turn into corners. Like we mentioned, the wide handlebars give you plenty of leverage to tip the bike into turns. And it's running on Metzeler M5 tires. There's plenty of grip when you're leaned over as well. So if you were to find yourself on a nice winding mountain road with the Leoncino 250, you will end up having a pretty good time. Braking is a concern on this Leoncino. Now braking distances are, well, not the best in class, but that's not the real problem. The issue here is the brake lever itself. There is absolutely no feel from it. It's very inconsistent. At times it feels wooden, at times it feels spongy. You never know how much braking you're going to get from it. The ABS calibration too is rather strange. It kicks in when you least expect it. And even the rear brake pedal, there's too much travel before it even starts braking. So how does the Leoncino 250 fare on the highway? So while the overall performance isn't all that hot, the Leoncino does feel fairly comfortable at highway speeds. In 6th gear at 100 kph, it's doing about a little over 6000 rpm. And at these speeds, it's as refined as it is in the city. And it's also got enough torque to make quick overtakes without having to downshift. When you hit about 120 kph, the bike feels very buzzy, especially in the foot pegs. That's a speed you don't want to do for a long duration. What will also bother you is the droning noise from the intake and exhaust if you keep the bike at high revs for too long. So if you want to ride on the highway at reasonable speeds, the Leoncino does a pretty good job. But what if you want to actually ride long distances? Well, things start to go a little downhill here. What really holds this Leoncino back from being a good highway machine? I'm sure you can see it. It's that seat and that riding posture. Now let me explain what the problem actually is. Your upper body is actually in a pretty good place. The bars are nice and wide, they are set far enough away from you, and you're sitting nice and upright. But the seat itself is a big problem. It's quite narrow, it's quite hard in places, so it will sort of bother you in certain areas. And then on top of that, the foot pegs, they are set a little too high, which really pulls your heels very close to your thighs. Now I am not a very tall guy, I am just 5'9", but in just an hour of riding, my legs were getting severely cramped. If you're any taller, it's going to be a much bigger problem for you. And if you're shorter, well, a seat height of 8-10 mm is not ideal. I mean, fine, I can get my feet on the ground just about, but say if you're maybe 5'5", this might be a bit of a problem. And have you seen the size of this pillion seat? Good luck trying to find someone who'll actually be willing to ride pillion with you on this bike. All these issues really are a shame, because the Leoncino 250 is a rather pretty looking motorcycle. It's a proper scaled down version of the Leoncino 500, mixing a scrambler stance with the poise of a neo-retro road bike. Some details really stand out too, such as the semicircular LED DRL in the oval-shaped headlight, the narrow horizontal tail light, and who can forget the little lion of Pesaro, now in all black. In fact, in our opinion, this is the most striking looking motorcycle in the 250 segment. But the thing is, it doesn't feel as solid as the Leoncino 500. I mean, the overall build quality is fine, but the plastics, they don't feel all that great. And even the panel gaps are not very consistent. And when the motor finds some sort of resonance at 4 to 4,500 RPM, you do hear a very annoying plastic buzz. the Leoncino 250 does have its share of flaws. Some a bit serious, some not so much. But they would mostly be forgivable if it wasn't for that price. At 2.5 lakh rupees ex-showroom, it's priced the same as far superior motorcycles such as the KTM 390 Duke and even the Royal Enfield Interceptor 650. And it's not just a case of CKD versus made in India, because the Honda CB300R, an objectively better bike than the Leoncino in every way and a CKD as well, is priced a little bit lower than this bike. And it's such a shame because the Leoncino's easygoing nature actually makes it very likable. But honestly, if you wanted an easygoing 250, Yamaha already makes one. So as things stand, while the Leoncino 250 does have its merits, none of them are strong enough for us to actually recommend it. And that makes me just a little bit sad.